you so much for joining me today. I really
No problem.
appreciate your time. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, indeed. So predominantly, I am an architect. I did a degree in architecture some years ago, and moving from that, I'm in construction and in property development. So therefore, my day-to-day job is in a construction firm. We are tier one contractor, building jobs in the environment and the community. Using my experience from architecture, I've then used that to apply for helping people that are within my circles.
Fantastic. This is actually very good, actually, that I'm talking to you today, because I'm looking
Yeah.
at some development opportunities. So that's good.
Excellent.
Can you tell us a little bit about a project that you've worked on recently?
Yes, I can tell you about many projects.
Yeah. All right, one that stands out.
um, would we want to be sort of talking about on the bigger scale or the sort of more relatable residential scale?
Do you know what? I think if we could hit both, I think that would be amazing, but only if you're up to it. So you let me know what you want to share.
All good, all good. Okay, so on a bigger scale, I'm actually working on trying to procure a car park, a multi-store car park in a Conquest Hospital that is in Hastings.
Okay.
So currently the hospital, most hospitals are all run by trusts. So therefore they've realised a demand for parking. But obviously, as you perhaps knows, in quite a few hospitals, you can never find parking.
Nope.
So it's quite a huge demand that we need to fulfil. But obviously there are challenges in terms of the current parking that is going to have us build on it is the current staff parking.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, given the COVID situation, there isn't many cars in the parking as it is, but at the same time, they do realise that they need to be able to sort of take where people that are parking in that car park anyway elsewhere, and it's a bit of a jiggery pokery in order to try and provide that. So that is something within the community, I say, in the Hastings community, that is a big thing, and obviously working in a bigger outfit that allows me to be a part of that project to plan that through.
Okay, cool. So what kind of has it already happened or you're doing it now?
It's we're in the pre-construction process.
Okay, so you're allowed to say any more about what your ideas are, or you're not allowed to say that?
I can say what my ideas are, but I'll keep it sort of a bit vague.
Yeah,
So
that's fine. I understand.
absolutely. Yeah. Usually if it was a tender competition with other contractors, then I probably wouldn't be able to talk about it at all.
Okay.
However, in this ilk, I do believe that we are sort of talking to them on a one-on-one basis. So yeah, the idea is basically to try and get this car park built over 4 stories, and take on the challenges that the hospital are presenting us, and deliver a product for them. It's interesting in the fact of so I've built many car parks before, where in Sevenoaks and Canterbury, where within the community, and especially with the sensitivity of cars in general in the environment, it becomes a sort of a not in my backyard. Yeah, not in my backyard situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are those challenges that have to be faced, etc.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, I know you said this one isn't going to tender, but for those people watching that might not know what that means, could you just explain a little bit, please?
So what happens is that usually a client that could be of any sort of group or company or private person would basically have a brief or a desire to have something built or developed.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore they would develop their brief and say, this is what we want. And putting it out to tender means for any contractor or any sort of builder to sort of propose the works that they're going to do for the brief that has been set.
Fantastic. And can I just ask, when you put out a brief, when somebody puts out a brief and you tender for it, you
Sure.
don't get any money to put together your pitch, really, do you?
No.
You just try and meet the brief. And if
Absolutely.
you don't meet it, then you don't get paid for all that work that you did, right?
Exactly. It's almost like an elaborate quotation. So if you were, you know, trying to get your kitchen done, you'd want someone to come in and put that tender quote together. It's exactly the same thing. Obviously, it's just a bigger product that you're pitching for.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. Thank you for explaining that to everybody.
Sure.
So you said you could talk about a smaller project as well. Do you want to talk about something a bit more that might be what people are actually working on? Because I don't know how many people are looking at car parks. Not me, but there are people looking at car parks. We need parking, right?
Absolutely. So a smaller project that I'm currently involved with is a semi-detached house that a client has just purchased. So their desire was, before they were purchasing their household, is that they have an existing 3-bedroom house, but obviously the family have outgrown it. So therefore they came to me with advice, or asking for advice as to, look, we want to buy a house as of a buildable property, but with the scope to be able to develop it into something that is of the size that we want and suits us. Mm-hmm. Can you help? I've helped them along the process of sort of looking for houses and trying to get them to understand what their budget can afford, and also what they can get as a gross domestic value after it as well. They do see it as their forever home, but as we know, nothing is always forever.
Yeah.
At the same time, that, you know, you have to kind of understand their desires and then try and help them cater to that budget. So at the moment, we've just submitted the plans for, well, in fact, we've actually submitted 2 proposals for single story side and rear extension, and also a double side and rear extension. However,
so that's 2 applications for the same property, is that right?
Yes, indeed. So in the respect that usually we always apply for one, obviously they want to be able to get the maximum, which is the double side extension, but the challenge is not every household on that same street has been able to achieve that. So it's a way of trying to design something that allows that to be welcomed by the local authority, and hopefully if it does get it, happy days. If it doesn't, then the plan B is the single story, and hopefully that will get approved as well. Do
you have to pay for each one of the applications that you put in?
Yes,
right?
you do. I do believe that most local authorities are around about the same, which is around about £206 plus a handling fee and VAT. But it's up to the client whether they're ready to expend that money for both applications at the same time. Now, I think the main desire for this client is to be in the house as quick as possible, because right now they've had to move out their current, their old property and move in with the mother-in-law. And if you're talking, exactly. I mean, after the first day, he texted me and said, so how long is it going to take again?
Have they got kids? They've got kids, don't they?
Yeah, they've got one. Yeah, they've got one.
They got a bit of childcare there, so that's good.
Yes, exactly. So those challenges are interesting.
Yeah, what do I want to say? Okay, so for me personally, working with an architect, I get so scared because every time you do something new with a house, right, it's like a new thing you have to do. So when you buy a normal house and a mortgage, that's scary enough as it is.
Absolutely.
But if you want to buy a house that you also want to improve upon, and you need to hire an architect, that's just like unknown territory for like so many people. And I think the cost of how much, I think as soon as you hear architect, you think, oh my gosh, I can't afford it. So would you be able to give us a bit of a reality check of at what point you get an architect involved, when you might pay for something, how much that might cost, just something like that?
Sure. So in the general scale of how I work is that I mean, I've been fortunate enough where it's the most people I've done quite a lot of work for people I know and my friends. So usually it's a point of advice. Like obviously, you know, when let's say for instance this client I was just talking about says, Les, I want to be able to do X, Y, Z. Then also I'll come round and explore with you what it is you're trying to get out of the whole project. And then I'll say, okay, in this case situation, I will go away and write a fee proposal and say, based on what we have spoken about, this is what you want to achieve. And then this is the breakdown of how much you should be paying at each stage of the project. So I do break it down in terms of, you know, the first phase is applying for planning application. The second phase is doing the more detailed drawings in order to get it built. But you have to also note that it's not the be all end all to how it should be built. There is still discussions to be made. So I highlight what exactly it's going to cost and what it takes for my time. You know, if it's going to be within 14 to 21 days or however long, so that you get an actual idea for for you to sort of mull over and say, okay, this is palatable, or whether this is something I can do in 6 months' time or 12 months' time, and then it becomes an easier process for the client to handle.
Cool, thank you for that.
No
And
problem.
if so somebody puts in a planning application, say they only put in one, and that doesn't get approved,
Sure.
what kind of reality is it of, well, you just have to let it go, or can you normally tweak what the local authority want you to do and therefore work out a way to still make it happen, just not
Yeah.
exactly the way you originally planned?
Sure. So I think that the key to it, I mean, not to blow my own trumpet, but I've been quite successful with getting planning applications approved
Well
almost first.
done.
Don't get me wrong, there are some that have come back and you've had to kind of tweak things and go through the appeal process perhaps. And that's just, I mean, for give an example, to not try and digress, but there was a conversion of a garage, which is a garage, and they wanted to convert it into a room. Now, the basis of why they wanted to do that is because they had seen other properties in that same street all do it.
Yeah.
So in the instance that they've taken or taken my advice and we've put in for planning and it's been rejected, I can be like, well, actually, number 50 and number 48 and number 12, they've all done the same thing, and you've said that we can't do it. So sometimes it gets to a point where you have to manage expectations of you as a client or after what you're after, and that will be quickly established on the first sort of consultation, and say like, look, I know you want X, Y, Z, but sometimes you might be only able to achieve X and Y. So that manages expect, because obviously me submitting the planning drawings, I know roughly what what is welcomed by the local authority. So it doesn't become a rigorous process and a sort of disappointing process when you don't achieve the planning that you hoped for. So in respect to direct to your question, is that sometimes there are techniques in terms of saying, well, by the way, Mr. Planning Authority, like we've submitted this, and then you sometimes might have to use current examples to try and achieve that. Or sometimes you might be able to expend a little bit of money for a pre-application meeting. So before you submit your planning, you can speak with a planning officer and say, this is what we're planning to propose. What do you think? Now, obviously, they're not going to categorically say yes or no, because that just takes away the whole statutory process. What they will do is just advise as to, yes, we would welcome this, we might not welcome that. So that sort of shapes how the final submission goes for you, and more or less allows you to get that success that you want first time round.
And you talked a bit about like the local authority. Obviously, you've worked with quite a few local
Sure.
authorities. So, are there ones that you know are inside out, and therefore you choose to work within those, or can you work anywhere? It's just a matter of you have to get on the computer and do your research to learn everything about that local authority.
Yeah, I think it's a case of I'm in this game to sort of to take on any challenge. So I'm not going to sort of pick and and be selective as to what authority I will and will not work with. I don't believe that's how. I don't think I'll be serving my job if I'm saying to myself, oh, I'm not going to be able to take on that challenge. That's just I'm not going to do that. However, it's a case of being fortunate to land any job for one, or any project, and then try and use the precedent studies of what has happened in that local authority before. So it is getting down on the computer and doing your research, walking around the area and see what has been done before. So usually anytime I go to see a client, I would always have a walk around, or sort of little drive around their little surround, where their area or their property is first, and get an understanding of what that local authority does on a sort of physical level. And then that gives me a sort of a good standing to be able to get online, get on the planning portal, and then see, yes, that is, that was a project that was approved, or so that's something that I've seen that looks newish, that was done in 2017. This other road was done in, I saw that one, yeah, that was done in 2019, and it builds up a case of how you be able to get your applications through.
Fantastic. And then if you do have to make those arguments, for lack of a better word,
Sure.
that's obviously more of your time. So then that would be more that you would get paid. And then I'm
Yeah.
guessing do you have to pay to then resubmit as well, I'm assuming?
To be honest, so if you're going to resubmit, yes, you would have to pay. Have to pay to the council again. However, what I try and do is that I don't try and set a fee for every time I'm going to do a reiteration. My fee is that to be able to try and get everything done once.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So I wouldn't want to just do something for the sake of it and then hope I have to kind of reiterate the whole process again just for the sake of getting a double fee. I'd see that as not as a waste of time, but it's inefficient in a way.
You want to do the best job possible the first time so that you don't have to do
Exactly.
that.
Exactly. So, and the main thing of, as I said, why I'm in this game is to help people. So it doesn't become helpful if you do something wrong the first time around, or not quite to how the challenge is supposed to be set, and then you're regurgitating the whole process over again. I don't find that helpful, and as I say, I'm here to help people this smooth the process.
Yes, good. Because people like me, like I know that I want to do things, but there's just a million things I don't know, right? So
Absolutely.
in fact, I'm going to ask you some very personal questions about a project that I'm looking at. And if you don't know about that stuff, that's fine, just say. So I'm looking at a property that's in the Greenbelt area, which has a lot of restrictions on it.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit, well, for anyone that's watching this who doesn't know, can you explain a bit about what a Greenbelt area is?
So a Greenbelt area, from what I understand, is that it's a specific area that the local authority markates, or basically keeps secured as an area that is of greenery, should we say. So if there's like a lot of woodlands there, or conservation area of like greenery, or or plenty of parks that they want to kind of keep in keeping, then they market it as a green belt area.
Cool, thank you. And then, like I said, I know that there are many restrictions on those areas. It doesn't mean you can't do things. There are things you can do. So what are the things that are most likely to be approved, or in that kind of area? What's okay and what's not okay?
It's a difficult one, if I'm honest with you, because for one, I've only actually tackled 2 projects within my career that are in the green belt area anyway. But from what I understand is that there is no set one thing that you can or cannot do.
That's even scarier now.
Yeah. But the one thing I can say is to try and, whatever you're trying to achieve, is to be considerate to what's already there. And I think what the basis of setting the green belt area is to not kind of take away what is already there, if that makes sense. It's not to sort of drastically change the environment for what is there already. So and as I say, it's a difficult one, because a project that I was working on, which is of a bigger ilk, was a school, or it's a college actually. Now the college had a bit of land that is on their site that they were looking to sell off to Bellway Homes. Bellway Homes are a massive developer, therefore, so they've got a lot of money to sort of plug into projects, etc. However, they were not able to achieve planning on that site because it was a green belt area. But you could argue that this is a site that is it's required. Well, there's supposed to be a quota for I think 350,000 houses to be built a year, etc. This is the perfect opportunity. Surely, the local authorities should see that through. But because it's a green belt area, they couldn't allow it. So it had to go to the judiciary process, through to the government, etc., in order to try and stand it down, or appeal, win the appeal process. So whatever, it's a tricky one to understand how you can get around the whole green belt situation without going through perhaps an appeal process or a higher judiciary review. It's a difficult one. But if I'm to hone down into what you're trying to achieve, perhaps I could
okay. So specifically, I'm looking at a grade 2 listed building, which also has restrictions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it gets better.
Yeah, and so from what I understand, it wouldn't just necessarily be the house that's grade 2 listed. It might be the outbuildings may also count as grade 2 listed, and even the land itself. I've been told that the land itself is grade 2, which means it's really good quality. I don't know what that means either. Yeah. And so on this site is this house, which possibly we could extend. Maybe I think we can get planning to extend an existing property. It has some stables, which has had pre-planning discussions that you were talking about before, but they're not anything formal, just the first discussion about turning that barn, did I say stables or barn into 2 houses. And they didn't think that would be a problem, but that was discussed before COVID, so nothing moved forward on that. On the site as well, it looks as if the site is broken up into 2 halves. So one half has the house, the stables. There's also 2 caravans that have been put together to form a mobile home for somebody, and they actually pay a separate council tax, even though it's all on one plot of land. This is interesting. I've not told anyone all this stuff I've learned about this property yet, so this is interesting. And there is also on the other side, just looks like a field. It's like paddocks, and that has a big metal container in it, like a lorry container. And it also has stables, which are actually 4 stables, but it looks like 1. And so my plans are hopefully extend the existed property to try and add value there,
Yeah.
to convert the stables into 1 or 2 homes, whatever is better. I don't know.
Yeah.
The mobile home, I actually want to build a school for kids, because I work in alternative provision, so for kids that don't fit into mainstream education. So what I want to do is to acquire a lot of this land to actually have kids on it, like just learning vocational stuff. So I think the mobile home could be, because it's got toilet facilities and a kitchenette, that would be the base, you know, like every morning we meet in there and we work out what the day looks like.
Sure.
And on the land that's left, that's open, like part of the day-to-day projects in the school are, we've got this bit of land, how could we make some money? Like, let's come up with some ideas.
Yeah,
so
of course.
it might be like, let's put up a marquee and run an event, or maybe we could buy a glamping tent and then we could rent that out as SA to make some money. So the exact detail what I will do is quite open. I want to know what's possible
before you can understand the end.
Basically.
Yeah.
That was a lot for you to take in, wasn't it? Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, to be honest, it sounds exciting.
Yeah, it is. And scary.
Yeah. It sounds exciting. But I would, I mean, depending on where the situation of the property, you might want to sort of, if there's any more discussions with the local authority, you might want to have this, the suggestion of what is it that you guys want to see from this property, what is it that you guys need within the local community, and then that will start to give you a steer as to where the end product allows you to be able to make a greater value or greater return from this property. So for instance, as you say, you want to make create a school within this, this might be something that within the local authority is requirement, but the local authority haven't had any money or any sort of funding or anything like that to be able to produce something like this. So you might be doing them a favor, which allows them to grant you permission to do what you need to do within it. But that would be my first port of call, to try and understand what is required within that sort of locality of the property.
Can I just ask, because I've looked into this a little bit already, and so I wanted to have those kind of pre-planning conversations just about the plot as a whole, like you say, and like what do you need and how can I get what I want and you get what you want, like where is the compromise? But then when I went onto the planning portal, to be honest, it just freaked me out. I was like, oh well, it sounds like I'm gonna have to have already done lots of planning written down and drawings before I make them, whereas all I want is just to have a chat with somebody, and it seems like you can't actually do that.
No, unfortunately not. No, because even if it's just even in a small extension, and it's like, listen, I'm hello, Mr. Planner, I want to do XYZ, and they're saying, so where's the drawings? And they almost just shut off, and they say, well, I can't comment on anything until I see something physically. So unfortunately, it might be a case where you have to kind of expend a little bit in order to get something out of it, in terms of a conversation or some sort of guidelines as to where you want to, or as the route that you want to go down.
Can I ask then, because this is a big plot, it's like 2 acres.
Sure.
Is each planning, even that pre-planning meeting, is that per like building, or is that per plot? Do you know what I mean? Like if I go on, you explain.
I would say it's actually per the plot. So for instance, for the whole thing that you want, you can have one conversation about all of it.
Good.
Yeah.
Because like my ultimate goal is actually to build this, have this space where I can have young people to try out different things. So not just property stuff, but we might end up making like a little theatre or something, and then we do drama workshops, dance work. There could be loads of different things.
Absolutely.
But in order for me to get that, I need investors to be able to make some money off of the rest of the plot.
Yeah.
And once the money's been made, then I can have the rest to do what I need to do with the kids. So that's kind of how I'm going to the council about it as well. But yeah, to get that first conversation is just proving very, very, it's difficult, because I don't want to go to all this effort to make these plans if they're not anywhere
if it's not
near
viable.
what they want. Do you know what I mean? I'd at least like to be close to what they want. So is there, obviously I have to get an architect. I do have an architect already. So is that just the best thing to do? You just need to get an architect because you'll understand what's worked and what hasn't worked in the area already?
Yes. I mean, to be honest with you, I am in partnership with a sort of a smaller contractor that could handle that for you. I'm an actual, and I'm in talks with trying to establish a site of what we can get on it. It's quite a big plot. It's 8 acres or so. It's like, green fields, etc. So as I said, I'm in talks with with one of my partners who's able to sort of get those conversations going along, which we have a team of architects and engineers and consultants that can kind of move things along, as well as investors. So perhaps offline we could perhaps have that separate conversation, and perhaps move that along. But again, yes, you would need to sort of talk to somebody initially to sort of gather ideas, gather what the area is saying, gather what the local authority want, and then obviously it gives you a shape as to what you are looking for or what you are trying to achieve. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, thank you for that. And yes, we will talk after this stops recording.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. I think that's all my questions now then. So if you had to give any advice to anybody getting into property who was looking to add value, you know what buy, refurb, refinance is, right? When they add value to the and then they pull the money out. If anybody was trying to do that, which everybody's trying to do that, what are your top tips?
My top tips, to be honest, to caveat before I say anything, I am by no means a huge expert in that kind of ilk, and I'm still learning that kind of stuff. But my tips at the moment are to, number one, ensure that you are working in an area that you know. So, for instance, a lot of people will say, "Well, look, I've got X amount of money, and I want to go and, buy a property in where it's, cheap, basically, like, up north or something like that." But I would advise against that, because you don't know the area, you don't know how it's come up, you don't know where it's going, and you don't know anything about it. You're just looking at the value of it being cheap and what you can afford. So I will, first thing is always, work with what you know. Another tip is to perhaps work within your means. So, when I say that, work within the people that you know you trust, the people that you know what they're talking about. Quite often people have a big, huge plan or dream, and they let people talk the talk in the ear, and it leads to a bit of heartache when you're trying to get some money out of a property that was probably never feasible in the first place. So yeah, I always say work to your means. And probably can't really think of it much more, but probably a last tip would be to work with smaller projects first and then build up. So as I say, like even if it's a small bungalow or small garage or something small that you can get a small percentage out of, always work to the smaller percentage, and then build up, and that builds up your experience and then builds up your confidence. Those are the main things I'll say just for the minute.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm not doing that. I'm going for something big to start with. So you can tell me off in a minute when we go off. So I'm going to say thank you now and bye-bye. Press stop,
Sure.
and then I'm going to keep talking to you, okay?
Yeah, sure.
See you
Sure.
later.